welcome to Radical Feminist Perspectives. Today we're going to hear about the book which has just been published, On the Meaning of Sex, on the New Definition of Woman by Kajsa Ekis Ekman. It's going to be discussed by Kajsa Ekis Ekman and Anna Julia de Lisio. We have on screen the flyer from Spinifex Press, who are the publishers, and the ordering details, and I'm just going to show you the ordering details larger. Now, we will put these into the chat and we will show this at the end of the webinar so you can get those details too. So thank you so much to Anna Julia de Lisio and Kajsa Ekis Ekman for discussing this book, and over to you.
Hi, hello everybody, good morning, and thank you for having us here today. I am Anna, and I am happy to present the author of the book we are going to discuss today, Kajsa Ekman, as Joe already said. The book is called On the Meaning of Sex, and it happens to be a wonderful tool that describes the advances of gender identity theory and how this depoliticizes feminism and women's rights. It is a wonderful piece that portrays with very specific details the dangers of this new patriarchal backlash. Thank you, Kajsa, for discussing your book with me. I will make a little introduction about you and your work, if that's okay. She's a Swedish author and journalist. She lectures on internationally on prostitution and surrogacy. Her books are of great value for the feminist movement, and especially your book, Being and Being Bought, focused on prostitution, has been great. I am leaving much of your work out, but you're also an activist, so it's wonderful to be here with you today. I read your book in Spanish first. The first time when it came out, it really helped the feminists in the Spanish scene to have a proper resource to rebuttal the lies about this topic. I have prepared some quotes from your book to base our discussion on, and your book in English is available at Spinifex webpage, so I strongly recommend to go there and order it right away. So in your book, you show how we are supposed to be on the cusp of a gender revolution, that we are told to open our eyes and undertake a mindset reset, understanding that we don't need different rights and laws for different people because sex isn't what we are, but what we do. Men can be everything, women nothing. Males are perpetuated and females are dissolved. So I wanted to add something more before we go to the slides. It's about detrans, since we had the Detrans Awareness Day this week. I think it's important. I took this piece also from your book, where it says that the number of detransitioners has grown exponentially. Membership of the International Online Forum Detrans has gone from 300 to 30,500 in just 2 years. Would you like to comment something about this or present yourself?
Thank you so much, Anna. It's an honor to be speaking to you, especially, and thank you to Berlin Radfem for hosting this. Yes, I think the numbers that you quoted already are outdated. I mean, they're in the book, and the book was published a while ago, so I think it's grown even more since then. And I think the sad thing is that, you know, they're not getting heard. They're not being heard. They're being silenced all over the place. And I think it's very interesting that I saw just yesterday that somebody who was a phenomenon just a year ago, this British young man who wanted to be a Korean band singer, this guy called Ollie London, who was also wanting to transition into woman, is going to publish an autobiography called Detransition this fall. And I think, you know, that's a sign of the times. It's really telling that, like, he's doing this because everybody's already jumped on this trans train, and now this is outdated somehow, and now it's about detransition. And the sad thing is that the damage to especially young bodies of young females is not being addressed at any level in our societies.
Yeah, as Sheila mentioned many times in different work, also essays that she wrote, that is always connected to homosexuality and lesbians, right? Like this is affecting especially this target group. And if you are okay with this, we can go to the first slide. So we're dealing with, you said, and you mentioned in your book that we are dealing with a new theory on sex that has become hegemonic and commonplace in a short period of time. In just 10 years, countries, sporting organizations, the media, and international organizations in the West have accepted and adopted this view. At the same time, scarcely any in-depth discussion about it has taken place. What does gender identity theory actually entail? What ideology is expressed by it? And what consequences will it have, and from whom? Have you been able to answer any of these questions that you wrote in your book?
Yeah, well, basically that is what the book is about. I mean, this is the outset. I am setting out to actually answer these questions. And my idea was to approach gender identity theory as a theory, as we seldom speak about it as a theory. When I started writing this book, the theory didn't even have a name, which I think is outrageous. We're fed this theory as hegemonic. And what does hegemonic mean? It means that it's the theory that's not being challenged. If you state this theory from the level of an organization, a state, an individual, a social media account, you most likely won't be challenged because this is what you're supposed to think. And often we're told, we're fed this theory in the form of encyclopedias or lists of words in the beginning of books or in the beginning of pamphlets, for example, where we're told a cis person is a person that identifies with the sex that one is assigned at birth, for example, or we're told a trans person is this, a non-binary person is this. So what we're being fed here essentially is a theory, it's an ideology, it's a way of thinking. However, we're not being told that this is a theory. We're being told that this is simply how it is. And more interesting, when we oppose the central tenets of this theory, when we say, what is actually cis? What does that actually mean? We're not actually being met as if we were talking about a theory. Instead, we're being told that we're against people, that you are against this individual, this one poor individual that's just struggling, that just wants to live his life, that just wants to pee, that just wants to use the bathroom. And how can you be against him when his life is so difficult, right? So that's what we're told. And my idea was to try to stay on the theoretical level and see what does the theory actually imply, as it's never being proposed as a theory. And what I did find at the end of the book, which you will see, is that it's based on a number of internal contradictions, that it proposes in the beginning one thing, but it actually leads to another thing. And it changes idea all along as we go. So I guess we're going to get back to that later in the talk. What are these internal contradictions of the theory, actually?
Yes, and there is also something very much in connection to what you're saying from the Serrano trans activist to show how he applies the double standard, right, of which is the key features of gender identity theory. On one hand, biological women do not exist, so we don't exist as an oppressed group. But on the other hand, when speaking of a privileged group, we do suddenly exist, right? So this is where the theory always is whatever is functional for the trans activists, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I speak about that when I speak about the term cis, because obviously any system of oppression, any system of domination needs a way to name the oppressed subjects. So they can't just make us all disappear as women because they wouldn't have a way to name us. So they still must call us something. So first of all, they say that, a woman is anything or everything. It doesn't mean anything at all. It's like the only word that wouldn't have a definition, which would be, very strange to live in a society where no word would have a definition. where we're told that, you know, a car can also be a bike, and, you know, an airplane can also be a horse, and anything can be anything it wants to be. Obviously, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with one specific word, woman, that apparently means everything, and whose basis, we're told, is not biology. To use biology as a basis would be outdated. Biology, we're told, doesn't exist because there are all of a sudden 72 different genders or sexes, or, you know, we're told that gender and sex is a spectrum, and so on and so forth. Right. But the interesting thing is when we get to the new binary, which is cis versus trans, then we're told that biology is the very basis of this definition, because a woman cannot be a trans woman, because to be so, you have to be born as a man. However, a man can be a woman, because a woman anybody can be. So all of a sudden, these definitions are at the basis of the new binary again. So we get a new binary based on biology, which is if you're born as a woman, you're a cis, but if you are born as a male, you are trans and a woman at the same time. And another of these contradictions is the fact that we're told that trans women are oppressed both as women and as trans, which would be impossible, because either people know that you're trans because you're not passing, and if they know that you're trans, then obviously you're not oppressed as a woman, because to be oppressed as a woman, they wouldn't know that you were. But we're told that you can be oppressed as both at the same time, whereas we are not oppressed as either. So then again, there are a lot of contradictions here, which I think need to be sorted out in order to see how this ideology operates and functions on several levels.
Yes, and also like when they go on the medical interventions, it's again a binary, right? Either they get one thing or the other, so all the genders suddenly also disappear, and we're kind of back to the binary, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think what I speak about in my book is I speak of 3 levels of this theory. I speak of the first level, which is the level that most people only get there. That's a level that they present to like the broad society, which is that this is something about tolerance. This is about diversity. This is about just accepting people for who they are. This is about understanding that everybody has human rights. And I think it's interesting that when we read that on social media, the term everybody and all people is always like in captions. That like I, as opposed to you, believe that everybody has human rights, whereas you only believe that some people do, right? So we're told that, you know, this is just about being a nice person, and, you know, who doesn't want to be? So, you know, most people would stop there. Now, when we get to the second level, just like you were saying, Anna, we're told that this is about a new type of binary, that if you like pink, if you like dolls, if you are passive, if you are caring, you are a girl. If you like to play with cars, if you are dominant, and so forth, so on and so forth, you are a boy. So suddenly we're told that this is like extremely rigid. This is extremely binary. This is about, you know, you have to choose your role and decide who you are and change the body accordingly. So this is not about tolerance or diversity or, you know, be who you are anymore. It's about fitting into very rigid gender roles. And I have a hard time tracing back to a point in history when the roles were that rigid as the roles that we're getting. I mean, I make a comparison from Sweden, when in the 40s, Astrid Lindgren wrote Pippi Longstockings. So this was a girl that could beat up policemen and was the strongest girl in the world. This was in the 40s. You know, today she would be classified as a boy.
Yeah. I think you also mentioned the sport women, like with right shoulders. I think I would also be considered not cis, let's say, if I was younger now.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the funny thing about the definition of cis is that if you actually follow the definition, nobody's cis. Nobody can fit in. I mean, it's impossible. It's like this super idealist view of a gender role that I don't think a single person would be able to fit in there. Yet we're told that if you're not trans, you are cis, which means by this magic wand, they've made 99% of the people fit into gender roles and love the gender roles, because in the definition of cis, as we get it, one part is that you're content and satisfied with your gender role.
Yep, exactly. So shall we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Joe. So what we what we have here is the epitome of idealism. And what is patriarchy, if not the triumph of idealism over materialism? Idealism holds that ideas trump reality, while for materialism, reality creates ideas. The fact that a power structure can be based on something that cannot be seen or proven to exist, namely fatherhood, instead of which is of the utmost material flesh and blood, namely motherhood, is certainly an example of ideas trumping reality, of thoughts triumphing over what the eye can see. So basically, we are forced to believe something our eyes don't see. This is basically what this quote is about, right?
Yes, well, basically, in a Marxist terminology, what we mean by idealism is the belief that the world is constructed from ideas, and that ideas are the important thing. Whereas, you know, in a Marxist context, what we would say is materialism means that you first analyze what there is and what you can see, right? And patriarchy is an idealist structure, because as long as we've had a patrilinear society, what it means is that fatherhood, which doesn't really exist in a biological sense, a man doesn't know he's going to be a father unless a woman will tell him that he will be a father. Whereas a woman knows she's going to be a mother because her body tells her so. A woman doesn't doubt who's her child. She knows who is her child. Whereas a father will have to trust a woman to know who his child is. So idealism and the negation of material reality, the triumph of this connection between father and son, which doesn't have an umbilical cord, which just has a kind of idea as a connection, when that becomes the basis for inheriting property, names, and so on, instead of the very real connection between mother and daughter, you know, then we see here that we have a society which essentially is idealist, where we're taught to believe things that we don't see, as opposed to things that we actually see. And I think that it's very clear that this new type of gender identity theory is patriarchal to the core, because here we are being told that things that we don't see, that we actually don't believe, are true, whereas things that we can see are not true.
Yeah, I also took 2 lines more from your book that says, a person cannot both have the ability to give birth and to impregnate. So this is connected to the quote. And then you also describe very to the point, what we call sex began 600 million years ago, when the reproductive process evolved from cells splitting themselves into 2. Ever since, we divide mammals into 2 sexes. The one with large gametes is called female, and the one with small gametes is called male. So here you also put everything very much into a very clear perspective. And also you talk about Gina Rippon, which is a professor of the cognitive neuroscience of the University of Birmingham, whom dismisses most of the research on gender identity as simple neurotrash. I think it's also very, very important to mention this. So
yeah, I mean, it's the chapter, I think, where I mentioned Gina Rippon is where I go through the actual scientific research when it comes to gender identity theory. And what I find interesting is that it has a lot in common with the research that was very popular, like in the 80s, in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, when we had this kind of biologist backlash against feminism, where we were told that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We're told that there's a female brain and there's a male brain, and we're told that women are like this, it's yin and yang. You know, it was like a mixture of Jungian theory, patriarchal backlash, and kind of mystical ideas about men's need to run out in the wilderness and and so on. So back then it was really popular to quote and to study the type of popular science that would say women are like this, women love chocolate, why do women love chocolate, you know, and they were trying to find brain differences between men and women, like the definite proof that men are different from women. And what I trace in my book is that they were unable to actually find something like that. You know, of course there are differences, but most of the time they're overlapping. If you find something that is very typical for like a male brain, you can also find women who have that. You know, it's a lot of the time it's overlapping. But sex, on the other hand, reproductive functions are not overlapping, as you just said. You know, we don't have a person that can do both, that can both impregnate and be pregnant. You know, that doesn't exist. So all this idea about gender in the brain and about our brains being different, it's really about tendencies. And it's really about the chicken and the egg, like, or the hen and the egg. Like, how do we know what is a result of, you know, conditioning? How do we know what is real, and so on? Now, this type of trashy research is coming back, is making a comeback right now. However, like, the new researchers are not trying to find the female brain. They're trying to find the transgender brain. So what they're trying to find here is the gene, or the part of the brain that will tell you who actually is born as a female and who actually is born as a male, independent of the body. So this is really interesting, because you often hear, like, in debates, you know, this being thrown around. Yeah, research has actually shown that, you know, you can tell that some people are actually born in the wrong sex. No, you can't tell. Now, when I've gone through the research, you can't tell. And you'll find in my book, like, all that is just vague tendencies. I mean, there's one group of researchers who claim to find that male to female transgenders have a longer index finger, whereas some other researchers have found, no, it's just the opposite. It's a female to male that have a finger difference, and so on and so forth. You know, and other research will disprove what this. So basically, they're just desperate to find, like, the holy grail here, and to found, like, we found it. But so far, no, we haven't found it. So in research, they haven't yet even established that there is such a thing as gender identity theory.
Yes, it's like sex no longer exists in its own right, and has again become some sort of a personality trait. Like, the more woman you are, the less man you are, and vice versa. This is also a quote from your book. And I find it very much going back to the binary, right? Like, the more you behave in certain way, the more male you are. And again, you fall for this very binary, very priving systems, right? And then I also took another quote that says, sexual characteristics are, in other words, directly related to sex. And in a way, this links to homosexuality, because this is another quote, and while homosexuality does not require any interventions, gender reassignment is a project expected to involve the entire family. All family members are encouraged to begin therapy and to explore their gender history. So it does not only affect, let's say, the teenager or the young lesbian, but it's also like a full system that it's like a religion, right? It's like it starts with one member of the family and then spreads toward across the whole family and affects everyone. The same with the society, right?
Yeah, and I also find that, like, because often, you know, it's lumped together, like LGBTQ. So we're told that it's the same thing if you have a trans child as if you have a gay child, you know, and they're talking about LGBTQ clinics. Now, as I'm saying in my book, you know, nobody else needs a clinic. In fact, gay people and lesbian people fought against the medicalization of their condition. You know, it was about not being brought into a clinic. And here we have the opposite demand. We have the demand that we need clinics. You know, we need to change people. So this is, again, a contradiction. We're told that it's about finding out who you really are, but we're told to be who you truly are, you have to change, right? This is the essence. To be who you are, you have to change. You know, because if you didn't have to change, if you didn't require a clinic, you know, they wouldn't make money off of you. So obviously we're dealing with an industry here, and referring to what you said before, Anna, about the new binary, you know, when they're making analysis of the future of the gender reassignment market, you know, it's expected to grow about 25%, which is a lot if you compare to other industries. And more than 70% of that segment is young females that they want to reassign to males. So this didn't used to be the case. You know, when you heard about, you know, transsexuals, it used to be older males. Now what we have is a new group that basically is taking over the whole market. And when the industry is studying the forecasts of, like, how can this market grow, what they're looking at is two things essentially. And one thing is that the states pay for this treatment, because if people had to pay for it themselves, the market wouldn't be able to grow that fast. So that's why they're pushing to get states and to get medical insurance companies and so on to include this, which they've been very successful at. So like, this is now a free treatment. Now, if a woman is saying like, I'm flat chested, I want boobs, nobody's going to pay for that. She's going to pay for that herself. Now, if a man wants boobs, the state is going to pay for that. Yeah. Which I think is just a sign of like the irony of this whole thing, you know, what to say.
Shall we move on to the next slide?
Yes, please.
So the vast majority of young people seeking treatment as trans clinics are homosexuals or have one or several neuropsychiatric diagnoses. Most come from a highly educated family background, and 45% previously identified as gay or bisexual. 62.5% of girls in a British study had previously been diagnosed with a psychiatric or neuropsychiatric illness. Anorexia is especially common, as are ADHD, depression, and trauma. The figures are nearly identical in other countries. 60% of patients at transgender clinics in Sweden and Norway suffer from complex mental health needs. Similarly, a US study found 44% of girls aged 3 to 12 diagnosed with gender dysphoria who did not undergo hormone treatment turned out to be lesbian or bisexual in their teens. So this is what is connected to what we were saying.
Oh, yes, this is really sad.
Yeah.
I don't know what to comment, except I think it's really sad. I think it's really sad also that it's taken away the potential to see this as a cry for help of a new generation of girls that have grown up with social media, with the influence of extremely toxic gender roles, who have often been this, I don't think, it doesn't figure in this quote, but what comes later in the book is where I speak about that the prevalence of abuse in this group as well, that there is also a lot of these young girls who have been abused and who actually don't want to become males. And I think when I was studying their testimonies, what struck me as fundamentally different from the males who wanted to become women is that the males who want to be women, they want to be women. But the women or the girls who want to be males, they don't actually want to be boys. They just don't want to be girls. They just don't want to be girls. So it's not an idealization of things associated with manhood. It's just an escape from girlhood as it is today, right now. The demands associated with it, the pressures, and especially being a lesbian girl where the role models are all turning into trans men all of a sudden. So basically it's very difficult to find a role model. And I think instead of society trying to understand this extremely complex phenomenon, they just have a simple solution. Let's just transition everyone. And if they're not happy, you know, we forget about them. And this was also mind-blowing when I realized that the gender clinics, at least here in my country, they don't follow up. They don't follow up. So people getting this treatment are not part of a study, or, you know, if they don't call back to the clinic won't call them back ever. So the clinics don't know what happens with these girls.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this happens in very conservative countries, right? Like Chile, Argentina, where there was actually no access to abortion, but still the countries had already like the self-ID law implemented, like enacted. Also, the case of Iran, I think is very telling that this is directly linked to homosexuality.
Yeah, in both Chile and Argentina, gender self-ID was voted before the right to abortion. So I think, I mean, and this is, I think, what characterizes new and successful theories. New and successful theories, to become successful, they're going to have to combine most of the contemporary elements. They're going to have to combine modern and conservative. They're going to have to appeal to both. And what we see here is that gender identity theory has been able to appeal to both conservative countries because they're told there is a cure for homosexuality. and to extremely modern countries, because they're being told you're not modern enough if you don't do this. When gender ID was proposed here in Sweden, the reasoning was, and this is, it said, the reasoning was, we have to update, we have to modernize. So, I mean, that was the raison d'etre. The reason why we're doing this is because we have to modernize. It wasn't, you know, this is right. It was, this is modern. And we're the type of country that always wants to be at the forefront of everything. So if it takes to do this, then we have to do this. No questions asked.
I think next slide is also connected to what we're discussing. So particularly lucrative is the market for girls. This is what you said in the book.
Yeah.
Who want to become boys. It is estimated to account for 73% of profits. The fact an increasing number of clinics now specialize in mastectomies and hysterectomies will boost more customers across the regions, and that in turn will propel the market growth. Global market insights thoroughly analyze different parts of the world and identify the US, Germany, and Southeast Asia as the most promising markets to invest in. Those idealists who thought the world was moving beyond sex and gender will be disappointed. For the market analysis paint a very binary picture of the future indeed. According to a 2018 report by Transparency Market Research. So this is what you based, what you wrote here in the book, right?
Yes, and I mean, I think it's kind of ironic that when we see these market research studies, obviously it's about profit. You know, these what these figures come from are basically analysis that institutes make for investors to find out how they're going to invest. So they think, what is most profitable? Should I invest in mining? Should I invest in gold? Should I invest in gas? Should I invest in gender reassignment surgery? So this is just one of the markets, you know, this is not some kind of academic analysis of like, is this good or bad? This is just like a market analysis for investors to know if this is something that they can get a lot of money back from their investment on, right? So at the same time as here, it's very clear, you know, this is a capitalist industry that for every person that's not satisfied with their body, for every young person or old person for that matter who says, I want to change, you know, these people earn money. These people are going to make a profit. Obviously, they want more people to do so. Obviously, they think that every person who's not satisfied with him or herself is a good thing. Now, how can that be? And at the same time, we're told that this is progressive. We're told that this is something subversive, that this is empowering, that this is something that comes from below and is against the power. You know, and I think it's funny how something can be embraced by both the power and you know, activists at the same time. And I also quote later in the book that why do we never hear about these studies? Why do we never hear about the people making a profit off of this? Because it's not the poster board that they want. The poster board that they want is some kind of, you know, idealist group of young people, LGBTQ supporters who just want to be themselves. So that's why this is like what we see behind that is seldom talked about.
Yeah. So can we can now move to the next slide, please. So Joel Baum, head of education at US organization, the Gender Spectrum, opts for this wording to convince parents to provide consent for hormone treatment. And this also comes not only the market, but the manipulation they act upon the families, right? You can either have grandchildren or not have a kid anymore because they've ended the relationship with you, or in some cases because they've chosen a more dangerous path for themselves. And with this, we all know that they mean suicide or things like this, right?
Yeah, I don't know why the N seem to have disappeared here. I hope that's not the case with the actual book. But anyway, yeah, what this is happening is if we like remember the last slide where, you know, this is obviously about making money. This is about making a profit. How do you convince people to go through with this treatment? that we don't even know what the outcomes are. We don't even know what the consequences are, you know. Maybe the kid will become sterile. And a lot of parents know that, you know, if they go through with this, if they follow the Dutch protocol, which means puberty blockers followed by cross-sex hormones, followed by surgery. That's the Dutch protocol. Basically, once you're 18, you're done with all of it. You know, you've done everything. So what that means is most likely, yeah, the kid won't be able to reproduce. Now, of course, a lot of parents would be worried, right? They'd say, like, what if my kid becomes sterile? So this is how the clinics will threaten the parents into accepting this treatment. They will say you can either have grandchildren or you cannot have a kid anymore, because they've ended the relationship with you, or in some cases because they've chosen a more dangerous path. Now, obviously, a lot of parents will trust this doctor, right? So they will say, Jesus, if my kid is going to die, of course, I'd prefer them alive, right? So this is really a very aggressive form of marketing of a product that they want to sell people. And it was interesting because this has even been picked up by politicians in my country when they were going to lower the age of, mind you, genital surgery. We're not talking about hormones, we're talking about genital surgery here, to 15 without the consent of any parent, right? This was the proposal. So basically a 15-year-old was going to go to the clinic, get this treatment by him or herself with the doctor, parents not involved, right? So what the politicians were saying, what was in the proposal, was that they wanted to make this law change because if they didn't do that, all these young people would commit suicide, right? Then it was interesting because this TV program, Investigative Journalism, tried to find the source of the statement. Was it true that a lot of people were committing suicide? And they couldn't even find that source. And when they approached the people who'd made the study, they said, oh, it's a mistake. It shouldn't be in there. We don't have a basis for that.
Yes, there is a line in your book also that says 13 of the 22 trans people admitted to hospital following suicide attempts in 2015 had undergone gender-affirming surgery, while 9 had not. So basically, those who go through the operations, affirming surgeries, actually have more attempts to commit suicide.
Yes, that particular study was showing that, right? I mean, I'm very careful when I say things like that because, you know, we have to understand that there is a lot of studies that have different results. But so far, I have not come across a study that shows that this operation saves lives. I have not come across a study like that. There was a study that purported to show this, but it was taken back because it was shown that the figures didn't actually show that. And I think it's really interesting to actually get down to the studies behind this, because often we're told you want to kill people. If you stop this treatment, people are going to die, and so on. And that simply doesn't have a basis in the studies about this.
Yeah, it's a lot about manipulation, right? It's all about manipulation. So I think we could go to the next slide, please. So the role of the internet is fundamental. It features in the vast majority of accounts. Indeed, it is through online searches and joining forums that the girls report realizing that they were trans. One user specifies the video which began appearing in the recommended stream were what gave a name to my discomfort. So this is basically about the manipulation techniques, not only directly from the doctors and to the parents, but also the media, right? All of this theory is really equipped with all kinds of tools to affect the society. And this is one of the cases of the girls that are on the internet, and they get bombarded by all of this suddenly, and then they suddenly realize that they are trans. So for example, Gina from Sweden recounts, at that stage, I had started watching more and more YouTube videos where young trans people told their stories, showed how hormones and surgery had changed their lives and transformed them into their real selves. I would become very emotional as I watched these videos, and I could sit in my bed for hours on end just crying. I felt I was the person in that video, that my story was theirs, and that I needed the same help they had got. it felt somehow awful that I had not received this help before. The assessment and the diagnosis took just over a year, and after that I was ready for a mastectomy. So this is how you describe, this is just one of the stories, but you describe how the teenagers and how the society overall is affected by this, by the media, by the internet, and how I like, because in the book you really describe this kind of media really targeting certain specific teenagers with certain searches. So they go and they kind of bring these videos to their feed, and this kind of happened without them noticing, right?
Yeah. And I think because that chapter is basically about where I go through testimonies from these young girls, like what made them get into this, what made them do this. And I think it's like, it's a number of things, but one thing definitely is the internet. It's like none of the people that had searched, that had applied for a gender reassignment surgery at a clinic had done it without the influence of the internet. All of them that I read were speaking about that they were spending hours and hours on, well, in 2014, it would be Tumblr, it would then be YouTube, it would be social media where, yeah, as you were saying, the feed gives you certain images after you've already clicked on them. And also you become a member of a community. And it's very clear in that community that the hierarchy that there is between, for example, only being a non-binary person and going the whole way. And I think everybody who's been a part of a subculture knows that in any subculture, when you're young, it's about, investing in it. The person gets the most status, the more you invest in that culture, the further you go, the more risks you take, because that's what being young is about, right? So the bad thing is that here, this is not actually a subculture, because we're not going against the dominant powers. This is a subculture that's totally condoned by the state, by medical care, by older people. So basically, in a way, you are rebelling, but at the same time, you're doing exactly what they want you to do. And yeah, that's one of the things, constant bombardment on the internet, but also, of course, as you were saying before, mental health problems, a history of abuse, and homosexuality. Another thing which I find very interesting is that a lot of these people have extremely supportive parents, to the point that you think the parents might be pushing this whole thing, because often the allyship of the parents becomes a career path. The parents start writing books about their children's transition. The parents start appearing on TV, start making a career off of, being tolerant. And I think it's especially noticeable in the case of Jazz Jennings. If you watch the reality show of I Am Jazz, you see that it's really the mother behind this. It's really the mother pushing and forcing and going, every time that Jazz is saying, I'm not sure, she's there pushing. So yeah, that's a part that hasn't really been investigated, because often we're told that parents are like on the wrong side. We're told about parents like resisting this, but I think it's actually more common in this, that the parents actually are pushing this. And often these kids come from families that want to be on the right side of history, as we're told, that want to be progressive, that want to do the right thing.
Exactly. Well, if they tell you that your daughter or your son might commit suicide, then you think about it. When everybody's kind of pushing you for this theory, then you have to kind of, you're the only one going against it sometimes. So now we have much more happening in the media and online, and there's much more resistance from feminists, from gender critics. But before, it was very hard to speak against this. I mean, at least in countries like Germany, for example, everything came very late, and I think we could only talk about it like recently, like in the last, 3 years or so. I mean, there were some stuff, but not very much formed against this, right?
Yeah, but I also think there is a difference between accepting a treatment because you think your kid is going to die and writing books about that and going out in the media and saying, the kid is trans. Because why do that? It's interesting because what that says about the parent, or what people think that says about a parent, is that's a good parent. That's a great person. That's a tolerant person. That's a progressive person. If you have a kid who's trans, that says something about you. Now, if you say I have a kid who's gay, it's like, oh, that's what happened. It doesn't say anything about you, right? But here, the parents have a very important central role in, as you were saying before, being a part of this journey, as they call it, like this gender journey, where they are also told they have to examine their own gender history. The whole family has to go to therapy. The whole family has to be a part of this. So it becomes very much a thing of like being the new great modern family.
Yeah, and for example, in countries like Canada, parents cannot even go against this. There is I think some cases that the parents landed in prison shortly for trying to prevent the daughters from getting into these surgeries and treatments.
So it's happened here too. Not the prison thing, but what's happened is people have had their kids taken away temporarily. They've had schools call social authorities on them. Definitely has been a case in custody battles where one parent not wanting to go ahead with the treatment has been a case of, taking away custody and so on.
Yep. So maybe we can go to the next slide. The next one is also refers to dysphoric individuals and also the conservatism behind this movement. So hence, among the individuals examined in the Renström study, the risk of being hospitalized for a suicide attempt was 2.4 times higher if they had undergone gender corrective surgery than if they had not. Whether this is a causal relation, example that surgery actually worsens the poor mental health in gender dysphoric individuals cannot be determined. Nevertheless, the data presented in the paper do not support the notion that surgery is beneficial to mental health in gender dysphoric individuals. And then I connected also to another part of the chapter that says an Iranian LGBTQ organization interviewed 100 gay people and reported that dozens of them were forced to undergo sex change operations against their will. Many do so in order to be able to get married, but then have to hide their previous identity. It is also common that people forced to undergo surgery commit suicide. It's again kind of to putting the homosexuality topic that we discussed and this, the suicide cases, right? And then we can go. Would you like to comment something more about this quote, or shall we go to the next one?
Yeah, I can just say shortly what I find is kind of telling, which should merit a study of its own, is the fact that prominent organizations like Stonewall, for example, and we have similar organizations, Mermaids, in a lot of countries, in Spain, there's also these organizations, in Sweden too. A lot of the organizations that actually started being gay rights organizations are now trans organizations, like advocating surgery, often for the same homosexuals that they were defending before. And I think the explanation would be that often these are countries where they've actually achieved legal equality. They have same-sex marriage, they have all these legal rights that they fought for. And in order to continue receiving funding, you have to invent a new cause. So it becomes the trans cause. And I think it's very telling that these same organizations are advocating surgeries that are actually could be referred to as gay conversion surgeries, because they are turning gay people into heterosexuals.
Exactly, and connected to this is the next slide that describes the kind of wording that this movement and this theory uses. For example, dick, we use the word dick to describe external genitals. Dicks come in all shapes and sizes and can belong to people of all genders. Front hole, we use this word to talk about internal genitals, sometimes referred to as a vagina. vagina. We use this word to talk about the genitals of trans women who have had bottom surgery. So basically, I like that in your book you really refer to the terms like woman, how we are erased, and how all of this terminology are taken by this ideology, right? And this is a very clear short case to illustrate this intention that you have in your book.
Yeah, now I think it wasn't included in the slide where that came from, but if I remember that right, this is a definition from some type of organization that's working with health issues, if I'm not wrong. This is one example. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy examples out there, you know, and I think it's interesting because we're told in the beginning that we shouldn't use certain words like woman, you know, like to talk about our own bodies in a certain way. Because it might be offensive, because it might be exclusionary, because some other people might get offended, you know, but at the same time, the very same words are being used when it comes to referring to males, you know, without ever questioning whether we might feel excluded. So what I say here is I explain this by this model that I call open female spaces, closed male spaces. I mean, that's basically the new model for how to handle, you know, sex segregation nowadays, where the female space is being opened, where we're told that female sports, female changing rooms, female prisons, female words, female vocabulary, female groups, anything is open for everyone. So we're like the group of leftovers. We're the group of anybody and anything, you know, we're the group that's supposed to be inclusive. You know, we're the group that's supposed to be tolerant. Then, you know, the male space is being created. That's closed. That space is not demanded to be inclusive, to be tolerant, because as we all know, you know, males are so violent, so we can't ask them to host all these people inside because, you know, they're just going to be violent. And I think it's very interesting, you know, how that's just being taken for granted. I quote in my book this essay from Verso in England, where 3 philosophers, if I'm not wrong, were advocating for female spaces and female prisons in particular being inclusive of males, where they were saying that, you know, of course they have to be inclusive because, these people are feeling so excluded and so threatened in the male spaces that they have to be in the female spaces, because in the male spaces there's violence. Right. So this is very interesting. So males are violent, but when all of a sudden, when they're in a female space, they're not violent. That just disappears. Right. Then there's no risk. So basically, this is about constructing new hegemonies, new divisions, where we're told that we're going to be open and tolerant, but they don't have to be open and tolerant, because as we all know, they're violent and we can not do anything about it. We can just accept it the way it is.
Yes, exactly. And this is connected to the next slide, where we say that the cis woman, we are told, is a woman who is satisfied with her gender role. She's content and has never given the matter much thought. Above all, she's privileged. For if there is any word that crops up most often in connections with cis woman, it is the word privilege. She's lucky because she was born a woman and continues to be one. And since she is so lucky, she ought to be permanently apologetic about it and learn that both she and her sex must stay out of the limelight.
Yes. I mean, I think this was in connection with a quote from the US politician Ocasio-Cortez, who said that I'm a cis woman and I know that I'm born with a lot of privilege. And I know that I will never know what it feels like not to be home in your own body and so on. And I think that's amazing that this kind of apologizing is only demanded of women. You know, we don't have men saying, I'm a cis man and I apologize for it. I know I should share the space with my trans brothers. Men are never taught that they have to apologize for existing. Whereas we are told that feminism from now on is not about liberation, it's about inclusion. This is like the first and foremost demand that we get. We have to be inclusive. Like we basically exist to be inclusive. Whereas that was never the idea behind the feminist movement. It was liberation for us women.
Yes, exactly. So we have to let everybody imitate us, say that they are us, and we should be okay with that, right? And we should also feel guilty about it. We should have all this kind of guilt that keeps us silent, that keeps us complying and being under men, like a second class, right? I don't know if we have time for a next slide, or we should wrap up, because I think we have 3 minutes left. Would you?
Okay, go.
Would you like to say something to finish the webinar? Like to wrap up the webinar?
Oh yeah, maybe you don't have to read the whole thing because it's very long, or should we just leave it up and I'll just make a comment on it?
Yes, I would like that. That would be nice.
Yeah, so this is a Norwegian case. It's very interesting. It's about a man who walks into the changing room of all these different gyms in a place in Norway, and the woman who noticed that and asked him what he was doing there, she was reported to the anti-discrimination ombudsman and saying that she was harassing him for asking what he was doing there. And this is because all of a sudden, gender identity is a category in discrimination law, meaning that you can be discriminated against on the basis of your gender identity. Now, that's the only category where you can be discriminated against for something that's invisible. Because when she saw that naked man, she didn't know that he had a gender identity. She just saw a naked man, And so this case was receiving a lot of attention. She was vilified. He was, of course, praised. Also, there was a lot of support saying, like, he can't be in the mailroom because he will be harassed. Now, I don't know what male would be harassed because he's a naked male with long hair. Because when you see his body, like what she was saying, she saw a man in there. She didn't see an identity. She saw a male. Now, so without knowing it, she was discriminating against him because he apparently had some identity that she didn't know about. And I think this is really the essence of gaslighting. This is the essence, because we are taught that we have to be afraid to even ask, do you belong in here? We should just, assume that he has the right to be where he is and let him go about his business as they tell us. And, I think really now what it's about for all of us is we already know that most people understand this to be wrong. I think at this point, it's about courage. It's about the courage to speak up. It's about the courage to trust your own ideas and opinions and your own analysis, to not be gaslit, and to continue to speak amongst each other. Because only if we speak to each other, we will have the courage to speak out.
Absolutely. And patriarchy is about gaslighting us and submitting us women. So we should not comply. I think we are finished. So thank you, everybody, for being there. And I hope you get the book, because it's a great piece of work from Kajsa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And thank you to everyone who was here. I will now read all the comments because I haven't had time to see them meanwhile, but I see there's a great discussion going on here. So I will go through it now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.